Hello students, welcome back to the biology class. So in the last class we continued the chapter number 8 and we covered the chapter human health and diseases. And in the last class we covered the topic of immune system in the human body. We learned in the last class that the human immune system consists of lymphoid organs, and then there are lymphoid tissues along with cells and the soluble molecules which are called as the antibodies. We have already covered antibodies and the cells in the previous classes. So in the last class we only learned about the lymphoid organs as well as lymphoid tissues. We learned that the lymphoid organs are those organs of lymphatic system where maturation and proliferation of the lymphocytes takes place, and according to the order in which they are formed and then migrated, they are called as primary lymphoid organs and the secondary lymphoid organs. We learned in the last class that the primary lymphoid organs are those organs in which maturation and specific antigen receptor development on the surface of the cells takes place, and the primary lymphoid organs are just two in numbers: bone marrow and thymus. We learned in the last class that the bone marrow is the main lymphoid organ where all the blood's component, that means blood cells, are formed, including the lymphocytes. And we learned that the bone marrow is responsible or is the place for the maturation of B cells. And all those cells which are lymphoid cells which migrate from the bone marrow and they migrate to the thymus, they mature in the thymus. That's why they are called as the T cells. So thus primary lymphoid organs are involved with the maturation and specific antigen receptor development on the surfaces of B cells and T cells. B cells mature in bone marrow and T cells mature in the thymus. We have already covered in the previous classes that the cells which mature in bone marrow are the B cells, and they are responsible for production of antibodies, so they are component of the humoral immune response. And the cells which mature in the thymus are called as T cells, and they are part of cell mediated immune response. In the last class we also understood that once the lymphocytes are matured and they are successfully involved the development of specific antigen receptors on their surface, then through the blood and lymph they migrate to the secondary lymphoid organs. And the secondary lymphoid organs are those organs in which once these lymphocytes, that mean B cells and T cells, migrate, now they will learn to fight against the antigen, or they will encounter the antigens or the microorganism or the foreign molecules. And once they perform this response, they are responsible for their proliferation and differentiation, so that memory cells as well as the effector cells, cytotoxic cell, the immune suppressor cell, we have discussed these things in the previous classes, all these cells will develop. The immune response develops in the secondary lymphoid organ, and when immune response develops, definitely there is going to be proliferation and differentiation of both B cells as well as the T cells. And we learned in the last class that the secondary lymphoid organs include lymph nodes, spleen, tonsils, Pierce patches as well as MELT. We learned that the lymph nodes are those nodules or swollen structures in the lymphatic vessels which act like a filter for the lymph. So because they act like a filter, they prevent the foreign particles or the molecules from entering into the bloodstream. The second structure we learned in the last class was spleen. Spleen is the largest lymphoid tissue or the single structure. And we learned regarding that during the malarial infection, spleen undergoes enlargement. We learned in the last class that tonsil is also one of the lymphoid tissue, and there are 6 tonsils which form the Waldier's ring, which we have covered in the 11th class. And tonsils act like a filter to protect the body from the bacteria. We learned in the last class that Pierce patches are also there in the intestine, especially in the farther portion of the small intestine, that means basically the ileum and to some extent even jejunum also. And there are clusters of these lymphoid nodules present which are called as Spear's patches. And we also understood in the last class that MALT, which stands for mucosal associated lymphoid tissue, this is present in the respiratory tract, is present in the digestive tract, is present in the urinogenital tracts, and this lymphoid tissue constitutes 50% of the total lymphoid tissue present in the human body. So we covered the topic of the immune system, that how it is made up of, the various components of the immune system in the last class. Now in today's class we are going to start with the topic of AIDS in detail.